Hello, everyone. Good afternoon and welcome to Voices being brought to you by Radio Zindagi. I'm Miss Renu from Genius Kids. Very excited to be here. This is my favorite time of the week. And this show has been running since May and we've just had some tremendous response. So I want to begin by, first of all, thanking Miss Saba, Neeraj, and of course, Ira from Radio Zindagi for giving us the platform and for giving me the opportunity to host a show where we can really express and discuss so many important topics for the community. Today's topic of discussion is a much needed topic, especially for the South Asians and Asians. And this is a topic we tend to shy away. And I have to be very honest to say, I'm also one of these people that shies away from talking about this. The LGBTQ rights. For those who may not know what I'm talking about, which is probably unlikely, but for the benefit of doubt, LGBTQ is an acronym meaning lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer or questioning. As we're well aware, the Trump-Pence administration has repeatedly and is continually trying to take away the rights of the LGBTQ by trying to strip transgender people of their recognized identities and civil rights protections, putting barriers in the way of their access even to healthcare, and nominating judges and officials with very strong anti-LGBTQ records. We hope as a community that President-elect Joe Biden will honor this promise, where he's made it very clear that his next administration will be reflective of the diversity of America. So on that note, I want to welcome our amazing panelists today from our local community who are going to talk about this issue and also talk about the continued challenges of inclusion that they continue to face. So without any further ado, I'm going to begin by first introducing Samir Jha. Samir was bullied by those who thought they were too feminine. However, at just 14 years old, Samir was able to turn these tough experiences into something remarkable. In 2016, they founded the Empathy Alliance, a nonprofit organization dedicated to making schools safer and more inclusive for the LGBTQ youth community. Over the past several years, the Empathy Alliance has continued to expand and make a profound impact in accelerating acceptance and equality. I'm going to read this whole introduction because it's fabulous. Normally, I only give 2 to 3 lines, but I have to finish this. Through partnerships with organizations like GLAAD, the Human Rights Campaign, and GLSEN, features in media like the New York Times, NPR, and publishing their book, Read This, Save Lives, a teacher's guide to creating safer classrooms for the LGBTQ students, Samir has now reached millions of people across America with a specific focus on the South Asian community they're growing up in. Now a freshman at Stanford, Samir, who is non-binary, continues to strive for a more inclusive future. Welcome to the show, Samir. This is amazing. So proud to even get to know you.
Thank you so much.
And then, of course, we have his very proud mom with him, Charmaine Hussain. She's a proud mom of a non-binary queer child with a BA from Stanford University and MBA from Kellogg School of Management. Now I know where you get your genius brain from. Charmaine has spent 2 decades as a business leader, driving growth through inclusive, multicultural branding platforms. She then turned her efforts to increasing acceptance for the South Asian LGBTQ youth. Charmaine speaks on panels, runs workshops, counsels families, and organizes educational events to spread awareness on this topic. Along with her child, she manages the Empathy Alliance, a nonprofit focused on LGBTQ rights. Her advocacy has been covered by KQED, Mercury News, Radio Zindagi, East Bay Times, and Queering Desi. She's also a board member of the Desi Rainbow Parents, a global organization serving South Asian LGBTQIA families. Welcome to the show, Charmaine, and kudos to you. Then, of course, everybody knows him. He was just recently running for Fremont mayor. We have Justin Shah. He's an openly gay Asian American candidate, and he strongly believes in diversity and inclusion. Justin is a VP at a global IT company located in the Silicon Valley. He also teaches business law at the Ohlone College. And Justin is very active in the local community, serving as a board member of the Ohlone College Foundation and a chair of the Asian American Millennials for American Advancement. Welcome to the show, Justin.
Thank you for having me.
And congratulations on standing in the elections. You may not have won this time, but hopefully next time, for sure.
Thanks, we'll see.
For sure, you've got many people supporting you. Then we move on to Rishikesh Sathwani. He's an ITN and master's from Anderson Business School, UCLA. He's a techie and the co-founder of Pride, whose mission is to train, educate, uplift the lives, upskill members of the LGBTQIA community. He married his partner in 2017 in India in a full-blown Desi-style wedding amidst a lot of media attention. So welcome to the show, Rishi. You're muted.
Thank you very much.
And
Good
you
to be
have
here.
your lovely mom. Is that your lovely mama with you?
Yes, she is.
Wonderful. Welcome to the show, mommy.
Thank you.
And then, of course, we have Kandil Javed. He's an American Pakistani from New York. He's a co-director and chapter founder of human rights nonprofit Muslims for Progressive Values in Boston. He's been happily in a relationship with his partner for 3 years. So welcome to the show, Kandil.
Thank you for having me.
So wonderful. First of all, I will begin by saying I'm truly honored. There's such impressive backgrounds to read. It's wonderful to be on this show with you. So we're going to begin the show. For all the listeners who are tuned in, we're being streamed live on Facebook. So don't forget to post your questions on Facebook, or you can even call the station 510-657-1170, and they'll be very happy to post your questions here. So my first question, Samir, is to you. Can you tell us about the support you received from your family and friends when you came out in the open? Because this is a difficult one to do, especially in our South Asian community.
Yeah, definitely. It took me a long time to come to terms with my identity. Obviously, in the South Asian community, we don't talk about LGBTQ plus issues. We don't talk about the identities. It's definitely covered up, and it's something that I think a lot of people see as being Western or being American, as opposed to being South Asian. And so when I finally came to terms with who I was, I had to do a lot of research in order to explain to my family, to my parents, and to my friends, you know, how I knew so confidently who I was, why I was willing to come out and be proud about my identity. And in part of doing that research was looking at the history of LGBTQ plus identities in South Asia. And what I found was that we have such an extensive history of gender and sexuality variance in all the way from ancient times up until even the Mughal Empire, even during the British colonization. There were so many people who had a lot of different identities that now are seen as less than or are discriminated against. But originally, you know, the people who were living in South Asia celebrated these identities, whether it's, you know, a religious ceremony, or whether it's just very commonplace, you know, documents that talk about gay marriage. And so I was able to share that with my parents and explain to them, you know, this isn't something that has always been seen as bad. You know, even if now that's the connotation, this is something that, you know, only very recently was seen as a negative thing. And actually it's completely normal, and it has been recognized for, you know, hundreds of thousands of years. And I think that's something that really helped my parents come to terms with understanding who I was. But the other part of that was just giving them time. I think that it takes a lot of time and just thinking about it to come to terms with the fact that your child isn't the way that you thought they were going to be. And I think sometimes my parents describe it as like, you know, mourning the loss of a child that you thought was going to happen, was going to be a certain way. And that's not necessarily in a bad way, because now I turned out to be something completely different. And I think now they'll say that that's much better than what they expected even. But it is.
I'm curious to know, as a parent, did you know before you were 14, or did you just hold yourself out and wait until you were 14 to tell them, or did you only discover this when you were 14?
So I have an amazing relationship with my parents. I think that's one of, you know, my favorite things about my family is how open we are with each other. So the moment that I knew, I told my mom, like literally the minute I finally came to terms with it myself. But that's not to say that I didn't maybe have a suspicion for a much longer time. But because I had been bullied for being gay or for being feminine and being called, you know, gay as a slur, as something that, you know, no one wanted to be, because of all that bullying, I had really repressed anything that, you know, I might have thought. And I tried so hard to be what everyone wanted me to be, or what I thought I should be. So, if I hadn't faced so much bullying, I think I would have been able to come out earlier than 14. I probably knew, but I was just in denial for so long, to myself and to everyone else. And I remember my parents, asked me throughout my childhood, because they were very, supportive. They tried to be as supportive as they could. And they asked me, oh, do you think that you might be gay? And I was always so adamant. I was like, no, I could never be gay. Why would you think that? I got angry at them because I had been facing all this bullying, and it felt in a way like my parents were part of that same, bullying, because being called gay, from what I'd seen, was just a terrible thing. And so I think, it took me a long time to dismantle that internalized homophobia and realize that it was okay. And once I did that for myself, then I was able to do that for my parents.
So Charmaine, that would bring the question to you. So when did you notice signs? Because Samir just mentioned that you asked him, if he was gay. When did you notice those signs, and how did you come up with a comment like that? Because if you were to say something to a child, they take it very sensitively.
Yes. So Samir was always atypical. From very early on, Samir gravitated towards things that maybe, like playing with dolls. Their favorite color was pink. They are a very curious person, very intelligent, very articulate. And so some of the things we never knew, is this just part of who Samir is? Because Samir was different, I would say extraordinary in many, many, or out of the ordinary in many, many different ways. And so we had a couple of instances. They like theater. And so sometimes when we were watching some plays, some comment would be made. Part of it was we were just trying to share with Samir the idea that being queer is fine, being gay is okay. And so if Samir would say something to us, we were trying to reassure them that, hey, you know what, like we think we have friends and we think it's all right. Now, I will say that doesn't mean that when Samir actually came out to us, we were just wonderful parents and it was all great, because when they actually did come out to us, maybe they didn't even realize, but I think it was a shock. There were many months that were very, very difficult for us, and we did have to go through that process. No matter how accepting you are or you think you are, we all carry biases inside of us, sometimes ones that we're completely unaware of. And yeah, I can talk to you a little bit more about that if you.
So you've obviously been a very strong pillar of strength for him, right? So we'll definitely talk about those hurdles, because I'm sure many parents are in a situation and they're not sure how to handle something like this. So we'll move on to Rishi. So Rishi, you made a very bold move to go back to India to get married to your partner. And obviously that's not easy. I mean, it would have been easier to get married here than to go back to India. What made you take this decision on, and knowing that you're going to go into a country which is probably not going to be as accepting as even the US, and how have you handled this?
Well, the seeds for that decision was planted a long time ago when I was attending various weddings, my cousin's wedding, and I'm like, everybody's having wedding. Why can't I have one? But for me to have one, it was not as easy as just organizing and having it, right? I had to make sure that, first of all, my partner is ready for it, my parents are ready for it, the people who are going to attend are okay with it, the venue I have, and there is a lot of people that are, when you are having a public wedding, it touches a lot of people, and had to make sure everybody is okay with it. So I started coming out on Facebook, and I have a lot of my high school friends, teachers, and whatnot from my hometown on Facebook. And over the period of many years, I saw that some were comfortable, some were not, and things like that. When I visited back, I talked to them. I made sure they know I'm gay and I have a partner, and a lot of them showed support. Of course, some of them were hesitant to talk or avoided me, and I mean there were people in every part of the spectrum, right? Then my first partner was not ready for any kind of wedding, but all that kind of fell apart. And when I had to find a new partner, I made sure that my partner is going to be okay with having a wedding in India. So that was one of my interview questions. And Yes, Vin said that yes, he has no problems. And then my parents were kind of not ready, even when the wedding was happening. There was some part of them was like still afraid that somebody might create trouble, or there were relatives who were really trying to build up a front to stop the wedding. They were contacting the people who were going to attend and saying like, this guy is ruining our family name and blah, blah, blah. And I was trying to counteract that behind the scenes, trying to keep my parents calm. I was nervous in many ways inside, but I had to show I'm strong and confident. So, I had to play a little actor there.
I'm curious to know, when did you come out and tell your parents, or did you not tell them until you waited till you were much later on in life?
Well, I I came out when I was 23, when I came to the US.
Hmm.
And, in India, even I was not quite sure because it was like pre-97, hardly any internet access. I didn't know anything. So when I came to Iowa State, that's when I joined a LGBT club. And then I was sure that, first of all, I'm gay. And then pretty much a week or two after that, I kind of told them and all that. So yes, I came out in 97 technically. But going back to this story, my love story with my partner started at the time, and then we decided to have an engagement here. And those uh, pictures were posted on Facebook, and then I meticulously observed who from my hometown liked it, who said positive comments and all that. Immediately, all those people were on the invitation list. A month before I reached my hometown, my parents went ahead. They figured out what are the different options for the venue, catering, blah, blah, blah. And then I landed 10 days before, and I immediately selected this. I decided which cake, design, and all that. So my parents really facilitated a lot of things so I can come and select and hit the ball running.
That's
I mean,
wonderful.
yeah,
That's
and
really
then
wonderful.
it happened, and there were friends of me who were like, oh, nobody's gonna come. You haven't really done anything bad to others, so why should they come? And then from politics point of view, they said there is another conference happening, so they're busy there, blah
Mhm.
blah blah. Even if so looked at a lot of those factors behind the scenes, and then it happened. One thing
So
I did.
you had a full blown religious wedding.
Um, yes, it was. I wouldn't necessarily say religious. There is definitely religious elements to it, but I
Mhm.
wanted
Okay,
traditional, a very
traditional.
typical wedding in a small
Mhm.
town. I just wanted to be like that. I didn't want it to be grandiose or anything. It was just a simple desire, a dream for me, and fortunately, it came true. With
Wonderful. Well,
everybody.
thank you. Thank you for that. Hopefully, we'll after the show you can share some pictures with us. Now that I've added you as a friend, so I can see some of those pictures.
Oh,
Um,
absolutely.
yes. So, Justin, my next question is to you. Your roots are South Asian. How similar do you think the reactions are in both societies? South. I know when it comes to the academics, we're very similar in a lot of ways. But what about in accepting the LGBTQ communities? How is the Asian community? Are they more accepting now that you have a lot of Indian friends? What are your thoughts on this?
I'm sure Samir could also attest to this, but growing up Asian American, I think there's really not too much difference culturally. I think that East Asian, South Asian, unique differences, but also great similarities. And you've got your ABCs, your American-born Chinese, right? And you've got your ABCDs, American-born confused ACs. So there's similarities, but perhaps, unfortunately, this also includes reactions when it comes to, accepting individuals in our shared communities who happen to have been born into the identity and who correspondingly identify as LGBTQ.
Mhm.
I don't want to overgeneralize, but it's kind of what Samir was saying. It's not so much I think, to do with religion, and there's the historical element there, but perhaps it's a bit cultural, more with the family unit, passing down, especially for the East Asian community, passing down the Chinese, like the family names, very important, having descendants and kids.
Mhm.
Um, and also even maybe a collective sense of pride in the accomplishments of like those close to us,
Mhm.
especially with respect to the external facing world. And that's why LGBTQ issues, mental health issues are perhaps more stigmatized because maybe some people feel like that's not something to be proud of. But, you know, I will say that I think that times are changing, and I do think that, you know, being LGBTQ is something definitely to be celebrated.
So
Sure.
how did you break the news to your family, and at what age were you?
I was a teenager, actually. I've always known that I was LGBTQ back, you know, in my, I want to say almost like preteens, but, you know, I didn't really fully come to terms with all of it until maybe even late college or early or right after college. So that, yeah. So maybe like, you know, that would have been 21, 22.
And how did your family, were they readily accepting, or did it take a lot of time?
It took a lot of time, you know, not, you know, but, you know, it's very typical. But actually, ironically, I think the first time I ran for public office in 2018, being attacked for being gay by my opponents and their team, I think it actually brought a little bit more closure to the issue for my family, because, you know, it's one thing to have your son, you know, be gay. It's another thing for your son to be attacked by,
Correct.
You know, who don't even know you for being gay, and it's just totally.
Yeah, and it is a shame that people would stoop to that level, especially in politics, to do that. But again, like I mentioned earlier, I commend you for standing in the elections and doing that, and I hope you come back again, you know. Kandil, do you find support in the community amongst your friends and family? Tell us a little bit about your story and you know, your background. How old were you when you came out openly with this? How did you tell your family? How the reaction was?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on this show. So the journey of coming out was quite different for me, just like it is for everyone else. I got exposed to LGBT identities when I was in college and working for the campus and, you know, doing work around social justice and diversity. And I came across LGBT identities and got introduced at that point. But there was something in the back of my head, which I always told myself that it is not for you, right? You don't have that luxury and freedom. Maybe it's not accepted culturally and religiously within the family structure in which you were raised. And I come from, you know, a practicing Muslim background, a Pakistani family, and I had that in the back of my head for years, and I finally started coming out after college, and it took over about 3 years. At first, I came out to my brother, who was very close to me, and then all my friends, and then finally to my parents. It was a journey. It still is a journey. I did receive a tremendous amount of support from my friends who were just like, "Oh, we knew it," or we knew it and we were waiting for you to tell us, or we had no idea, but we love you the way you are. Please don't change, you know. I had that is on one end of the spectrum, and then I have some other responses, which is a response of withdrawal, where people were like, okay, well, we don't want to do anything with you. So people handled the situation based on how they perceive our identities to be. And I co-founded the chapter of Muslims for Progressive Values for Boston. As Muslims for Progressive Values, we advocate for equal human rights, social justice, and inclusion in the US and around the world. So a lot of my work is around gender inclusion, gender affirmation within the religious communities, which is predominantly South Asian, and challenging the norms, or what perceived to be the norm for the LGBT inclusion, and doing programs around it, and really just providing an inclusive space for folks like myself who can lean on it and be a part of it and thrive together in this community, along with other folks that are not LGBT identified. So this journey, the work around organizing and doing social justice, has really empowered me in many ways to deal with my own journey of coming out and reconciling various parts of my identity.
Thank you for that. And before we move on into my next round of questions, I do want to go to Rishi's mom, if I have the permission to ask Rishi's mom, Rajeshri ji, a question. First of all, welcome to the show. You need to unmute, Rishi, if you could just unmute.
Thank you.
Welcome. So as a parent, the same question I asked Charmaine earlier is, when Rishi came to you and told you the news, what was your first reaction?
English or Hindi?
You can speak in Hindi. Don't expect me to speak back in Hindi. My Hindi is saved for off air. But you can speak in Hindi, no problem.
Okay. जब मुझे ऋषि ने बताया तब तो मुझे मालूम ही नहीं था कि ऐसा कुछ होता है करके। बाद में 2007 में मैं यूएसए आई, तो वहाँ ऋषि ने काफी लोगों से मिलवाया और पेरेंट्स से उनकी सब सुनी मैंने कि उनको क्या क्या प्रॉब्लम है, क्या नहीं है, उन्होंने समझाया भी मुझे। और वैसे मेरी बेटी और मेरा बेटा दोनों ने मुझे समझाया कि ये क्या होता है करके। आखिर में मैं तो ये डिसीजन पे, हम दोनों ये डिसीजन पे पहुंचे कि अरे मुझे अब मेरे बेटे को खुश देखना है, और वो जैसा भी है वो मेरा बेटा है, वो खुश रहेगा तो हम खुश रहेंगे। इसलिए फिर हमने उसको सपोर्ट करना चालू कर दिया।
And what about when you decided to do the shadi, the planning of the shadi, you probably got a lot of objection from relatives. How did you handle that? How did you decide who to invite and who not to invite?
मुझे तो पहले पता ही चला था कि कौन अपोज में है और कौन अपने साइड में है, तो उस हिसाब से ही मैंने उनको दे दिया, इनविटेशन दे दिया। और एक बार ऐसा हुआ कि इनके दोस्त के यहाँ हम गए, उनकी बेटी ऋषि के क्लास में थी। एक्चुअली हम उसको इनवाइट करने गए, तो उसके पिताजी ने और मम्मी ने हमें पूछा, क्या आप हमें इनवाइट करने आए हैं ना? तो मुझे बहुत खुशी हुई, तो हमने उनको भी इनवाइट किया। ऐसे ही शादी में कुछ हमारे भी फ्रेंड थे दोनों, और ऋषि के फ्रेंड तो ज्यादा थे, लेकिन बीच बीच में मुझे डर लग रहा था कि कोई बाधा ना डाल दे इसमें, कोई कुछ ना कर बैठे। तो बार बार मुझे यही याद आ रहा था कि भाई किसी ने कुछ बिगाड़ने का नहीं, शादी अच्छी चल रही है, अच्छी चलने दो। और ज्यादातर मैंने किसी को बताया ही नहीं कि करने वाली हूँ करके, ऐसा प्रोग्राम करने वाली हूँ करके।
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And for those who've just tuned in, you're listening to Voices being brought to you by Radio Zindagi, and I'm Miss Renu. And you're listening to the show about the LGBT community. And that was Rishi's mom. And I think if anyone wants to take one thought away from the show today is that you don't do things to keep other people happy. Your child comes first, and you have to make decisions based on how you feel for your child. And for someone that's in the childcare industry, I cannot tell you how I can stress that. Stop comparing people, stop wanting to have somebody else's child. You have your own child, and every child is a miracle of life, and you have to be thankful for that. Thank you so much, Rajeshri ji. That was really beautifully said. I wish I could have spoken in Hindi back to you, but I know Seba will fire me off the show if I even try Hindi. So, so moving back to you, Samir, what do you think about the current political climate and how it supports or does not support LGBTQ rights? And don't get me started on Mr. Trump at all. But anyway, just kidding. And what are the topmost things that you think need to be worked on to fix, to be able to enjoy these equal rights that everyone, that we all should be entitled to?
Yeah, I think we're at a really interesting point in time when it comes to LGBTQ plus equality. In just the past, my lifetime, I was born in 2001. And in my lifetime in the US, we've seen homosexuality be decriminalized and then gay marriage be legalized and so many other things be legalized. We've seen in India, we've seen homosexuality be decriminalized, and there's cases that are about to be heard that have the potential to legalize gay marriage. So there's a lot that's being done just in my lifetime, and I think we're at a really interesting point, because while there is all this support and there's all this, finally there's a lot of movements that are trying to make change, there is also, you know, as with any movements that happen, there's going to be backlash, and there's going to be people who are scared of change and who want to keep things the way that they are. And so that's what you see when you see reactions to all these progressive policies from people like Trump, who try to roll back. And I think it's really important to note that a lot of what Trump is doing, and a lot of what you know, a lot of leaders around the world who are more conservative are doing, they're not, you know, instituting new policies as they may like to claim that are beneficial. They're just rolling back things that have already existed, whether that be, you know, trying to roll back healthcare for trans people in America, or whether that be, you know, more large scale things like, you know, the British colonizing India and then criminalizing homosexuality. And then, you know, we see when homosexuality is decriminalized in India for the first time, you know, I think this was less than a decade ago, and it got rolled back again. It's this push and pull. It's always this push and pull of trying to make change and then reactions to that. But I think overall, we are seeing a forward push. And as for what needs to happen now, you know, to get to equal rights, I think, you know, first of all, we need to have these conversations. It's really important to have, you know, regardless of the legal and political landscape in our communities, first, you know, the change needs to come from the people, because we live in democracies, right? And so the change needs to come from the people that are living in the country, that are being affected by these issues. If we, you know, collectively say this is something we all want to see, we all want to see equal rights for LGBTQ plus people, then it's very hard to deny that. So having these conversations, making sure we're all on the same page is incredibly important. And then on the legal front, there are still a lot of states in the US that allow discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. So we need national protections. We see conversion therapy in a lot of states and a lot of countries around the world. Conversion therapy is when it's allowed to try to forcibly make children become straight, or try to, because, you know, all major scientific and psychiatric organizations have said this is impossible. You can't change someone's sexual orientation. It's a combination of genetics and of environment, but it is fixed, and you can't change that. But there are a lot of groups around the country and around the world who still try to do things like electroshock therapy, you know, really scary things to try to force kids to become straight. And so that's something that needs to be banned across the world. And then, of course, I would love for, you know, homosexuality to be decriminalized around the world and gay marriage to be legalized. You know, as someone who identifies openly, very openly as queer, there are so many countries that I feel like it's unsafe for me to visit just because in that country I am a criminal just by being myself. You know, I can go to jail. And that's so scary that for so many people, this is the case. And absolutely, I think that this is something that in my lifetime, I would love to see changed, because we are seeing the movements. We're seeing the show of support. And I think that's only going to grow stronger.
Thank you. You wowed me. And let me tell you one thing. I want to send this clip to President Trump so that he can learn how to answer questions and talk sensibly. For a 19-year-old, you're amazing, Samir. Seriously, you're amazing. Wow. I hope to see you someday up there. Charmaine, you're the board member of the Rainbow Parents. Tell us a little bit about your organization and your work with them.
Yeah, so there is this wonderful lady, Aruna, in New Jersey, who started an organization about 5 years ago, around the same time when Samir came out, and I was doing work, and our family was doing family acceptance work in California on the West Coast. She was doing a lot of work on the East Coast, getting parents together, she has a wonderful persona that welcomes people and involves a lot of people. And so really, when I think of Desi Rainbow Parents, I really have to give kudos to her, because she was this one woman on a mission to create, you know, gender and sexual diversity, inclusion, acceptance, celebration in the South Asian community. And so we joined together, and more parents joined together. We think we have like more than 70 parents right now Our organization maybe has about 500 people. It's the only organization of its kind that serves the entire Desi diaspora. We have people who are from, Pakistan, India, with heritage from Afghanistan, Fiji. So just all over the world, we work with other parent organizations that are country specific. And we do things like cultural celebrations. We celebrate religious holidays. Kandil has done some wonderful work with the organization. That's how, we got to know each other. And really, it's Desi Rainbow Parents is like a family. We run support groups that are peer-to-peer support groups for other parents whose children have come out and they're trying to get education and learn, but they need cultural context. They need translated like language, in their language materials that they can understand. So we put all of that together. And we're also raising funds right now to be able to go to, gurdwaras and mandirs and mosques and churches, because our diaspora represents all these religions and more. And so we want to go to places of worship where some of these, we feel very strongly that if we hold events there, we will be able to accelerate sort of acceptance with the community. Because as I said, when Samir came out to me, even with all of my being in California, thinking I'm so liberal, it was a shock for me. It took some time. And I think there were so many fears, partly because of ignorance, because I just did not have, understanding of what it meant for my child to now live a life that was going to be different from the norm. I didn't understand, honestly, anything about what it meant to be LGBTQ other than what was shown in the media, which all turns out is crap. It's like not based in reality. So you have all these ideas about what being queer, what that lifestyle, quote unquote, would look like. And then I will definitely say, as a family, we never had the fear of like log kya kahenge, but we always had the fear of log kya karenge. There are so many hate crimes that you hear about. There are films that sort of show the violence, or news reports, and so we had that concern. And then in 5 years now, the journey that I've gone on, I don't have those fears anymore. All I have is like pride. I have happiness because I've seen what my child, for example, has become my teacher, has shown me when you live a life of courage, of authenticity, how joyful that can be, and you can be very successful. And when you are your true self, you attract people who are loving, who are supporting. And those people that you're always afraid of, they're few. They're a small minority, and you're letting them sort of dictate how you're going to be and how your family is going to be. So
Right.
I feel like now I'm not fearful. And in fact, this personal growth for me has meant that I've also started shedding all the social constraints and social expectations that I had allowed society to put on me as a woman. And so it's been an incredible journey. I always tell people, and I'm not making this up, now 5 years in, I feel like the biggest blessing that my child is LGBTQ. Tomorrow, if Samir said I'm straight, I would actually have a much bigger shock and go through a much sadder process, because I think Samir is wonderful, and all the people in Samir's community are wonderful. They're part of the Desi Rainbow Parents and Allies family, and I'm really happy to be part of it too.
It's so wonderful to hear you speak like that, because, we talk about the word normal. I hear this all the time, in the educational business, because we'll have kids who might do something a little different. And we always have parents say, is this normal? And I always say, what is normal? And who has decided what is normal? I think we're all a little off in some way, and there's nothing wrong with that. And to bring up your point, I think for all the parents who are listening in, it's okay if your boys want to play with color pink and play with dolls, and your girls want to drive trucks. That's okay. I know for me, especially, Charmaine, when I was looking to get Christmas toys, I said to my daughter, I said, I'm trying to find a really nice doll. And she looked at me and she said, why do you think Gia should only play with dolls? Mom, she likes trucks. Go get her a truck. And I'm like, yeah, what am I doing? I'm always also stereotyping myself too. So thank you so much for educating us on that. Thank you. And I hope all the parents are tuned in and listening, and all the families who are listening. This is Voices being brought to you by Radio Zindagi. Do join in the conversation. I do have one question here, and I'm going to probably pose it out to Kandil maybe. Or actually maybe to Rishi, possibly because of the wedding. The question came from the listeners. They wanted to know if you've ever been excluded from any religious activities. So actually any of you could answer, but Rishi, I'll start with you since you had a wedding. Were there any religious activities you couldn't do because, you knew that some people were not going to partake in this, or you were not going to be able to get the help to do it? You're muted. You're still mute. Yes.
Well, I have an interesting relationship with religion, just like the mute button. Uh, that early on, my aunt was very religious. She was, the sannyasini and all that. So our house was like soaked into religion, and that really pushed me away from the religion. So early on, I pretty much became atheist, and I didn't really care what other people think, whether they let me do it or not. I will do it if I want to do it. I do participate in a lot of religious activity, primarily because it's more cultural for me, and my parents are happy when I do that. So no, I was never excluded. But during my wedding, I did have trouble finding somebody who is willing to marry me. So yeah.
So if you don't mind me asking, did you marry an Indian?
No, my husband is a Vietnamese American.
Okay.
Vietnamese Chinese American, yeah.
So you meant finding a priest or someone to conduct the ceremony. Is that what the struggle was?
Yeah, the struggle was with the priest, yeah.
Oh, with the priest. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry.
And while I'm on you and asking you questions, how about revealing your identity in terms of a career? Do you think this has impacted, does it impact people's career when you, do you have to reveal it or?
Yeah, I mean, when I started my career in Boise, Idaho, where I was shit scared to come out at work. Then I moved to San Jose. The environment here is very different. It was still not mandatory for companies to offer LGBT, benefits, partner benefits. But yeah, I started coming out even before that at work, first a few people, and then eventually bigger and bigger crowd. Um, I'm sure there was, when you're working, your career depends on not just your boss and people who are directly interacting with you, but a lot of decisions on you happen in the background. So I'm really not sure if it impacted and how much it impacted. I'm sure there was some impact. But I think the bigger impact than that I can see is with my own struggle. Like, I was struggling to coming out with my parents. I mean, I came out to them, but they were still not okay with it. And that all coming out process with parents, with friends, and everybody, it takes a lot of energy, and it does impact your career. I mean, the more you're focusing on being comfortable with who you are, the less you're focusing on what you can do to go ahead in your career. So yes, um, it has, I think, impacted my career.
Thank you for that. Justin, since you're in politics, do you think there's more representation needed at the city, state, and federal level for the LGBTQ community? And where do you think we stand in terms of legalizing the same-sex marriages?
Yeah, I do think that representation is important. I'm sure Kandil could speak to this as well, but if you don't have a seat at the table, sometimes what do they say? You're on the menu or something. So, and this is true for Asians as well, so like even today, you still see those data charts of like, white, Black, Latino. Where's the Asian? We make up a lot of percentages of population now, especially in important swing states. But yeah, in 2015, the Supreme Court made same-sex marriage legal in all 50 states. So that was a Obergefell, a landmark decision. But as I'm sure Samir could, attest, we still have a long way to go. And perhaps even the most historic case for the LGBTQ community was actually this year in 2020 with Bostock v. Clayton, because that was the case where they finally said employers may not discriminate on the basis of homosexuality or transgender status. So that's, but I encourage all the LGBTQ listeners tuning in to, Radio Zindagi right now to consider applying for commissions at, your relevant municipal area, your city, your county. Fremont is woefully underrepresented in LGBTQ persons serving on important commissions like planning or, human relations. So, Dublin, Santa Clara, Milpitas, wherever you are, consider running for or applying for something. Yeah.
Thank you for that. And Kandil, do you think there's denial of one's own LGBTQ identity in the community owing to social pressure?
Absolutely, yes. There is a lot of, especially in South Asian communities, it's not something that is talked about, right? So a lot of times when folks come out, parents have this fear-based reaction, whether they go through a withdrawal where they're like, oh my gosh, what is it going to be like, or what is going to happen to my child? A lot of times they have this kind of like a fear, especially if they're affiliated with a more traditionalist community where, these things are definitely not talked about at all. So it does put a lot of pressure on the individual to self-accept themselves first. Like I mentioned earlier, like in my own journey, I thought that it was not a privilege that I had to even come out. And I said to myself, like, if I am going to live the way I'm going to live, I'm not going to be a hypocrite, but I'm going to have to hide parts of my identity. But it just so happened to be, life is so interesting. It just so happened to be that as I progressed in my career and became the individual that I am today, it shaped in a way that it kind of re-emphasize the importance of me coming out and owning up to everything that I am. It's probably the best decision that I've ever made for myself. It's not easy. I have a lot of respect for Samir. Not only their responses are very spot on and very, knowledgeable, but also in that age is very crucial, very critical. And a lot of times, and if you look around, a lot of, teenagers are just out there, partying or spending their time on social media, and they're not really, looking forward to bringing a change into the community. So I have a lot of respect for Samir for all the great work that they've been doing for this community, because it is an effort, right? So we know the challenges are to even bring up the conversation to the parents, to the communities. And oftentimes the response is what used to be many years ago is they don't want to talk about it, right? It is your business and you talk about it behind closed doors. Like one of my cousins once told me, like, whatever you do, it's behind closed doors. And I'm like, I have a partner. I mean, there's nothing that I can hide him, I can't hide him behind closed doors and then go out and, pretend to be straight when I'm not. So, living with those identities, there is no hiding behind closed doors, or let's not talk about it, right? And oftentimes it's stigmatized, with the fact that they hear the word LGBT and often they think about, how are you going to dress up? Who are you going to go out with? Who are you going to date? What is the perception of the world going to be, right? But just by working with the Desi LGBT community here in the Boston area, I've come across incredible individuals that are identified as LGBT, and they're doing great work for the communities. I mean, on the forefront of the community for everything that's happening. You talk about Trump and a lot of stuff that this administration has done. Our community has been, rainbow is in the front of everything. If you look around, any ethnicity, any nationality, any background, any community, you would see that LGBT folks are in the front lines, whether it's the Muslim ban or the trans health bill. So we're on the front line, and it's only possible with the family support. So
right,
very, very important.
Thank you for that. We have a few more minutes, and I just want to mention that there's not going to be even enough time to address all the questions that we have. So we're definitely going to have a sequel to this show. I definitely will tell you that. Does everybody have about another 10 minutes for us to wrap up this show? Or is anyone in a mad rush? Okay, because I know we have a lot of people listening in and we're definitely going to have a sequel here. So Samir, tell us about the programs in your organization, Empathy Alliance, that help schools safer and inclusive of the LGBTQ kids. If you could address that a little bit.
Yeah, so my nonprofit, when I started out, because of all the bullying that I had faced, I really wanted it to focus on making schools safer and more inclusive for LGBTQ plus youth. So I really started out working with teachers and educators on issues of safety, inclusion, on how to make sure that you're making your classrooms and your schools a better place for your queer students. I think a lot of teachers didn't really realize that they had to do anything different, or that the way that they were, currently operating their classrooms was being harmful for their queer students. If you don't think about it, if it's not top of mind, then a lot of times you can play into bias that you didn't know was there, right? And so a lot of that was just, deconstructing a lot of the biases. It's so easy for when you have a young group of kids to say, okay, boys line up here, girls line up here. But that excludes people like me who identify as non-binary and people who don't feel comfortable with traditional gender norms. So little things like that. And then, just being openly supportive of your queer students, taking on gender and sexuality inclusivity training, so the kinds of things that are positive to say and the kinds of things that are harmful to say, standing up against bullying when you see it. That was something that in my school, even though I had all these teachers and all these adult figures in my school, I never once felt comfortable reaching out to any of them, because in the halls, I would see them walk by as someone called me gay, and they wouldn't do anything about it. So why would I go and tell them about it? Why would I, feel comfortable sharing the bullying that I had gone through if I knew that they were seeing it and not doing anything about it? So, that was kind of where a lot of my activism started, was making schools safer, working with educators, creating tools like the book that I wrote, Read This, Save Lives, which was a teacher's guide for people who even had never heard of the LGBTQ plus community, like a crash course on how they could, instantly make their schools safer and more inclusive. And I think as I've grown as an activist, and even as I've gone to college, which is a very different environment than the schools that I've been used to, all the way from elementary to high school, I've realized that, the classroom system is not independent from home life and from communities, and that's not independent from legal systems and the protections that are required. They're all interconnected. And I think especially now in the pandemic, something that's been very top of mind is how, even though kids are, going to school virtually, all of their time is being spent at home, right? And so now more than ever, community acceptance and family acceptance matters. And communities, when I was working with schools, a lot of times teachers were scared to talk about LGBTQ issues because of PTA boards, because they were scared of parent backlash. So all this is interconnected. And then on top of that, there are laws. For the longest time, and even I think now in some states, depending on how laws are interpreted, a teacher could be fired for being openly gay. And so all of these systems are interconnected. And now I'm trying to look at it more holistically and just saying, how can we increase acceptance and break down some of the biases and educate people on why all this matters, breaking it down to what are we really trying to do? We're trying to make the lives of LGBTQ plus people better. We're trying to stop things like the incredibly high rates of anxiety, depression, and suicide in our communities that all come from a lack of awareness, and that come from all the trauma and the bullying and the lack of acceptance that we face. It's really, to me, about saving lives and about making sure that we're not actively harming people in our community, people that deserve to be treated as human. And there's so many ways to go about doing that. But I think that really, if you care about, other human beings, then you should want to learn about and accept the LGBTQ plus community. And there's so many ways, little and big, that you can go about doing that.
Thank you so much for bringing that up. And actually, as an educator, thank you for reminding me. We're always saying boys on this side and girls on this side. The first thing I'm going to do after this show is call my teachers up and tell them to stop doing that. And, you know, it's interesting, even for someone like myself, we have our enrollment forms for parents. And it took a parent to let me know I had, you know, mother details and father details. And he called me back and he goes, I think you need to change this to parent and parent. And it really dawned on me that, yeah, what have I been doing, you know? So thank you so much for that. We just have a few more minutes, so I'm going to ask everyone to kind of wrap up and close. And I'm going to move, Charmaine, I'm going to keep you for last. But my next point is going to be to Rishi. You're the co-founder of Pride X. If you can just briefly tell us about your work and also, you know, how people can reach you. Mute.
Yes, of course. So my day job is I'm starting a new job with Samsung. That's my day job. But Pridex is my passion. It's a startup. I started with a co-founder in India. It's a radically different way of helping the LGBT community. It's a startup. It has an edtech element, fintech element. It has a platform for gigs. So what we are doing is identifying a few professions which can help uplift the LGBT community out of poverty. So it could be things like photography, and it could be things like interior design or whatever it is. We're going to figure that out and then structure a online course with material in regional languages, and get the people trained. After they are trained, we have a marketplace where they can get the gigs and make money. Once they start making money, they have education, we can go to the banks and say, hey, this business needs scaling. Then these people can scale up and kind of feed back into the community. So that's the idea. And I'm very passionate about it. I have worked for nonprofits and they're doing wonderful work, but this is just a Silicon Valley take on how to help.
And how can people reach you if they're interested in being part of this?
Yeah, they can reach me on my mobile 415-335-9393. We also have a website, pridex.com. Sorry, pridex.org. Um, yeah.
Perfect. Excellent. Thank you so much. And Justin, what is the Asian American Millennials for American Advancement? And what are your goals for this organization? If you could share that.
Yeah, that's a nonprofit that a lot of Silicon Valley millennials who grew up here founded, most of them actually from Fremont. We're just trying to give back to the community and also connect with others in the community. We recently did a high school workshop event that was very successful, and we want to do a women in IT a women in STEM event for high school students. And I do want to just say I'm also a board member of GAPA, and also, a member and participant of Tricone and Parivar. So for any of the LGBTQ listeners out there who, would like to connect or get involved in the community, feel free to contact me. My handle for Facebook, LinkedIn, anything is Justin Shaw. And if you'll let me renew, I think just one other thing is based off of Samir and what Kendall was saying. I do really believe that a lot of LGBTQ people are fighting for a lot of other issues, racial equality, women's rights, and so on. And I think for me as well, sometimes it's easier to fight for something that you're not as directly impacted, so to speak. Like, I could never have imagined, like, a few years ago coming on this show to talk about this topic, because it's just so personal. So, I think if we all speak up for each other, when, in passing conversation or whatnot, I think that's how we can make a difference as a society as well.
Absolutely. And, Radio Zindagi is always here to provide this platform. We welcome guests such as yourself who can be so passionate and so open about things and to educate people, because we really need to be, this has been a very educational an hour for me. So let me tell you, Kandil, I know you want to share with us a story about a student who's had a big difference in their performance. So if you could tell us that for your closing.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, to Samir's point earlier, I had a student, and I'm an adjunct professor of mathematics at a local university. And my student was a lesbian identified person of South Asian background. And in the beginning, there was just this lack of performance from her end, and she wasn't like really doing very well in my class, and just having a 15 to 30-minute conversation and really like getting to understand what was going on. And it turned out that this person was in the process of coming out, and so providing that support, just doing things that I thought I could have used in some of my journey at points in my life. Providing that, I saw that this student went from almost getting to a point where they were failing the class to getting into a B plus line, and then started doing very well in other classes as well. To know that they had that support system in their school, and their teachers are there, because teachers are, after your parents, teachers are your biggest support that you can have. So it plays a very important role when we support our LGBT students in the school, in the academia, because these are the people that are going to change our future, right? So just providing that support can really, bring out the talents that one might have.
And how can people reach you for your organization, Kandil?
Absolutely. It's Muslims for Progressive Values, so mpvusa.org. And my email is on there, the co-director of Boston chapter. So you can just email me directly from there.
Thank you so much. And we've been talking about parents and teachers. I'll give you a quick experience in our school. We have a child who has, his parents are LGBT, and we had, one of our teachers came and he was making a Father's Day card, and he was making 2 of them. And she corrected him and said, no, you can only make 1. And he said, no, I have to have 2. And when she found out what happened, she came into my office and she said, I'm only going to continue to work here if this child is not in the school. She felt it was against her religious beliefs. And I said, I have a very quick solution for you. The door is there. Don't let the door hit your butt on the way out. So on that note, I'm going to wrap up the show with Charmaine. So Charmaine, very quickly, what are your dreams for Samir? I mean, what do you want to see him on the personal and professional front? And also a message to all the parents listening to our show today.
First of all, thank you, Renu, for doing this show. And thank you to Radio Zindagi. I think Samir and I together, like one of our first media appearances was with Radio Zindagi. So it's wonderful, just everyone in the team there takes on these really difficult and hard conversations. And so thank you for that. I actually just have a really simple, dream for Samir. I just hope that Samir always remembers how much I love them, and that they just continue living their best life, knowing that, I will have their back. And that I'm really proud of them. I don't, they're always doing way more than I would ever expect. So now it's more me just watching, applauding. I don't have any other dreams or desires. For everyone in the LGBTQ community, I do have a message. If you are, Asian, South Asian, and identify as LGBTQ, and are struggling, or have struggled in the past, I just want to say sorry. I want to apologize, because we as parents, grandparents, siblings, aunties, uncles, we haven't done a good job in giving you the unconditional love and acceptance that you so deserve. This is our failure as a community, as people, as human beings. It's not your failure. And so if you are, in a situation right now, especially with COVID, 2020 has been hard on everyone, but especially any member of the LGBTQ community who's struggling, just know that you deserve all the happiness and all the best things in life. And you're beautiful just the way you are. And I'm sorry that we as a community don't always give you the support you need. Having said that, Desi Rainbow Parents and Allies and we're here for you. If you or anyone in your family needs support, please reach out to us. We have a website, we have a Facebook page, and we will do our best to be there for you.
Thank you so much. And thank you to all the panelists for a great show today. Cannot, thank you enough for coming on and speaking from your heart. And we're definitely going to have a sequel to this show. And my message to everyone is, even as educators and as parents, we're always telling our children, you're special, you're unique, just be who you are. Well, then if we're going to use those words, let's stick by them as well. Let's make sure that every single one of them is unique, and let them be unique in their own way. Don't try and live your dreams through your child's life. Let them lead their own life, and you've done yours, you're leading yours, let them lead their own. And I think truly every single one of you here is a perfect example of a lot of courage, and you're living your dreams. And I'm going to be waiting to have your pictures shared with me, Rishi. I really want to see these pictures for sure.
I will post them on the comment section.
Perfect. Absolutely. Thank you so much. And I hope to see you back in a follow-up show. And again, thank you, Radio Zindagi, and have a great week, everyone. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.